BookBabes, my name is Ainsley and welcome to my library. For today's video, I'm going to be telling you guys all about my reading stats and all about my top 10 reads of 2023. I have so many stats for us today and I'm super excited. I feel like every single year whenever Goodreads releases how many books you've read, pages, and all of that super fun stuff, I just get so excited to just share and talk about all my stats. It is so much fun to just sit and collect statistics. Even before my stats class that I took back in the spring semester, I've always just loved collecting data, and it's also really fun to be able to share that data and be like, look at how many pages I read, look which one was like my craziest reading month, like all those things. So it is currently December 26th, so what that means is I still have a pretty solid week until 2024 begins, and I most likely will probably finish 1 or 2 more books before then. So as of right now, these are just our current stats, and I promise that I will update all of my updated stats down below in the comments, just in case you guys want to keep updated with like what I actually ended up doing in 2023, since it is so early in the year. But this year I had a Goodreads goal of reading 63 books, and I actually beat that and I read 67. This year I read a total of 25,433 pages. What? That's crazy. Somebody said to me that they read 30,000 pages a year, and I was like, that's insane. I probably read only like 15. And then whenever I was doing the math, it was July and August, I read almost 4,000 pages in that month alone, and it was just insane to me that people can do that and that I'm so close to 30,000. Like, what? This is crazy. But yeah, I got 25,433. What? My average book length was 379 pages, which is actually really impressive considering last year my average was 320. So I'm reading thicker books this year than I was last year. Only a couple. I read a couple fatter books this year than I would have ever, and they really intimidate me, really scare me. It is a longer commitment, and I don't like that. So I just think that was really impressive that I was able to do that. I feel like I need to have my computer here with all my stats uploaded on it, just like right in front of my face. So on Goodreads, my average rating will say that it is a 3.5. However, whenever you take into account that I had half-star ratings and 0.75 and 0.25, that bumps everything up to 3.6, which I'm actually really okay with. I think 3.6 is a really, really good rating, considering that I don't think a 3 is a bad rating. Like, books, 3 is average, so that's good. If my rating is a 3.6, that means I read more books that I enjoyed, so I will take it. I will so take it. So this year was the first year that I ever actually calculated how many genres of each that I read. So this year I calculated in romance, fantasy, thriller, fiction, and nonfiction. Those were my 5 most popular genres and the only 5 that I read from this year. So for romance, that comes in at 50.5%. I read 34 romance books this year. And then fantasy comes in second place. I read 12 of those, accounting for 18.2%. With thrillers, I read 10 thrillers, and that rounded to be 15.2%. I read 8 fiction books, which is just like general fiction, women fiction, any type of book that doesn't really fit into any of these categories. 12.1% was fiction, and then I only read 3 nonfiction books. And one of them actually is making my top 10, which is kind of exciting. And that tallied to be 4%. So that was just really, really cool for me to divvy up. I normally don't do that, but I think it's really, really interesting considering that one of my goals this year was to step out of my comfort zone. And back in 2022, I think like 80% of the books I read was romance and thrillers. So the fact that this year I stepped a little bit outside of thriller and welcomed in more fantasy reads, and I thought that was just really, really cool to see that I wanted to grow, and I did grow. Oh my gosh. I think it's really cool that my commuter, I'm done, I don't even want to say the sentence anymore. And then I made this super cool bar graph to show which months were my pretty popular reading months. And as you guys can see, in April, I literally only read 2 months. And I think the big part of that is college finals. Like, literally everything is due in April and you have no motivation to really do anything. So April has just been a super low month for me for the past 4 years. I was not surprised that it was my lowest month. And July also has been my most popular reading month over the past 3 years. So that again was not a surprise to see that. What was surprising is how popular August was as well. Usually I'm pretty high in June, even higher in July, and then I dip back down to my average 5 in August. So the fact that I kind of just kept going and then came back down, but only just a little bit in September and October was really, really cool. But as you can see, my average number is 5, so I am pretty much reading a book a week, which I think is great considering I work and I do college and I commute. I just think it's awesome. So that is it on my stats. We are going to move right into my top 10 reads of 2023, and I'm so excited. So the order that I am talking to you guys about these books, it is not in order of this was my number 1 read, this was my 10th read of the year. Like, I'm not ranking them at all. I'm simply showing them to you in the chronological order as I read them this year, because Carrie Soto is back. This was my first 5-star read of 2023, and I want to show her off first because she let me start the year with a bang. So Carrie Soto is back. Oh my gosh, what a joyful experience. I listened to the audiobook, and it was actually a really immersive audiobook. Whenever there were like radio show hosts talking and we were getting and we were reading their commentary, we had their little theme music playing in the back. It was just a really, really fun audiobook to listen to because it didn't really feel like it was an audiobook. It felt like it was an experience, and that was just really cool. This was the first audiobook that I'd ever listened to that incorporated music and sound effects and just so many fun things that you wouldn't normally expect to come out of an audiobook. And I will say that this book, Taylor Jenkins Reid, she's a phenomenal writer, and I think the reason why I'm most impressed with this book is because I went into this book not knowing anything about tennis, not understanding it. I was actually really hesitant to start reading this book simply because I don't know anything about tennis, but she explained it in such a way that I left this book wanting to be a tennis player. Whenever she would write the tennis matches, my head was going back and forth as if I was physically watching them play on the court. It was just such a good book that you were able to just dive right on into. And the relationship that Carrie Soto has with her dad was beautiful, and just being able to experience this huge giant comeback and how her heart softened towards other people throughout the story, it was beautiful. She had the most amazing character growth. I don't really want to get my lipstick on the book. Then I read I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. Kind of a scary title, I know. And Jennette McCurdy, she was one of my favorite child actresses. Whenever I was a little girl, I really, really looked up to Sam Puckett, who she played. And I think it was just incredible to be able to read this book and get her perspective on what was happening behind the scenes, that I had no idea what was going on. And I think her vulnerability and her courage to truly share her story and not be shy of it was just beautiful. And I love the fact that she trusted us with her story. I listened to the audiobook simply because I knew that she was the one who read it. And I think it was really, really cool to hear her emotional inflection in some of the sentences and just be able to hear her tell her story. It was almost as if this book wasn't a thing and she was just simply speaking to me. So that was really, really cool, and it felt more personal than me just reading her book. Next up is Heartbones by Colleen Hoover. I read this book in February, and I would say my only biggest issue with this book is the fact that I read it in February and I really, really wanted it to be summer while I was reading this book. This book does take place in summer, and it was literally so perfect. Honestly, the perfect beach read. It's honestly upsetting that I read it in February because I think if I had read this book in July, it would have been such a success. But it still was a success in February, and it was amazing. I know that a lot of people are on the Colleen Hoover hate bandwagon. Whatever, you do you, boo. I don't care. But I love this book. 5 stars for sure. I loved Bea. I loved Samson. I loved how real and relatable these characters were, and just that you were able to watch them fall in love while still being scared of that trust that comes with loving somebody. If you're looking for a summary book that does have some depth to it, I definitely recommend Heartbones because this book was so good. And unfortunately, I do think a lot of teenagers out there will be able to relate to Bea and Samson's story. breaks my heart to say that, but I definitely think that if you are a struggling teenager, you can definitely find your home with Bae and Samson. Then I read Every Summer After by Carly Fortune, and I think honestly the biggest thing and the biggest reason why this book was just like so amazing to me is because this is a dual timeline book, and I normally hate those. I absolutely hate dual timeline books. If I find out a book has a dual timeline, I skip it. I no longer want to read it. Thankfully, I bought this book before I even looked and saw that it was a dual timeline because of how popular it was, and I ended up reading it and falling in love. It was so much fun. The imagery and the description was so real. I felt like I was at the lake with Sam and what's her name again? Percy. People will tell you that there's a plot twist. Personally, if you're like me, you will see the plot twist coming from like page 30. But it's still a really, really good book, and it was just a phenomenal read that I definitely want to reread as soon as possible. Next up, I read The Summer of Broken Rules, and this book was so amazing and phenomenal. K.L. Walther is one of my favorite authors that I met in 2023. I didn't actually meet her, I just like met her writing, and so she is probably my favorite author that I fell in love with in 2023 because just of the way that she wrote this world. She wrote such a fun, fantastic, energetic summer read, but it also had the rawness and the depth that comes with grieving, and the fact that she was able to intertwine two powerful emotions into just one glorious book. It was just phenomenal and terrific. I love Mare and I love Wit, and their natural just connection was so great to read. A lot of books now I feel have that slow burn, and while a lot of people like, yes, I get it, slow burns are amazing, they're awesome to read, especially whenever they finally connect, but there's also something so beautiful about two people immediately clicking and just naturally having that chemistry so early in their relationship. And this book was just amazing for that because we were able to watch the relationship naturally develop in such a good pace from the beginning of the book. Also, they play assassin, and I want to play assassin now. Like, I want that so badly. It was amazing, literally so much fun. I started this book on a Monday. I went to work and I could not even focus on my work because of how badly I wanted to finish this book. And then I finished the book and it was amazing. 5-star read, 5-star read, 5-star read. I actually read this book and then I added it to my all-time favorites Goodreads shelf because it's amazing. Literally amazing. Top 5 for 2023, top 5 for life. I literally love this book, and it's pink. I feel like you can't hate a pink book. Also in August, I read A Flicker in the Dark by Stacy Willingham. My mom read it, 5 stars. I read it, 5 stars. I gifted this book to my boss for Christmas, and I'm so excited for her to read it and hopefully love it just as much as my mom. This book gave me a book hangover for sure. I have yet to read a thriller book that matches up to this book, and I've read a lot of them. I feel like with thrillers, you can't even talk about how you felt reading the book because it could give something away. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this book. In this book, we follow Chloe, and Chloe is in her 30s, and she's kind of just recovering from all the trauma that she endured during her teenage years. So basically, whenever she was a teenager, a lot of other teenage girls started going missing and ended up being murdered. And it was discovered that it was her dad who was a serial killer. So he's been put away, and the 10th year anniversary of all of this happening that summer is coming back up, and it's slowly ticking time. However, since it's the 10th anniversary, current teenage girls start disappearing again, and pretty much the same thing's happening all over again. And so Chloe is just falling into this hole of, is it her dad? Is it a copycat? Who in the world is doing it? And it is just such a whirlwind of emotions. You truly go on this adventure. You do not want to put this book down. The plot twists, the turns, the discoveries, like you are just constantly on the edge of your seat, craving more all the way to the end of the book. Normally there's a good like 60 pages in every single thriller that I'm just bored and I'm like, okay, get to the point. I'm sick of all these twists and turns. But this book seriously kept my attention throughout the entirety of the book, and it was so good. 5-star read. Also, okay, this next book I don't own, but it is going to be Hello Stranger, and I listened to this book on audiobook immediately after I read The Bodyguard. So I love this author. Catherine Center is amazing. I didn't realize how many books she had, but not only that, but how versatile of an author she was. She has so many books that are in so many different genres, and it was really interesting to just scroll through her Goodreads and see all the amazing books that she's written. Sorry, I don't know why my voice was just like sounding like I was dying. I'm not dying. This is one of the greatest romance books I read this year. It was so beautiful and pure, and you fall in love with the main character. I'm forgetting her name because that's like my thing. I just never remember main characters' names, ever. I remember Joe from this book. He was pretty great. Our main character suffers from facial blindness, and she is a portrait artist. And all while she's trying to figure out how to get her sight back to where she can recognize faces, she ends up falling in love with two guys. And you kind of just get to follow her kind of tiptoe around, not wanting to step on any toes and be like, hey, like, which guy are you? So that book was just so much fun to read. It was comical, it was beautiful, it was lyrical almost. And anytime you get to read a book about an artistic person is like my favorite ever, because her art, the passion and the way she spoke about her art was just beautiful and so compelling. And honestly, I wish this book came with pictures because I would love to see some of the artwork that our main character created, even though it's not real, but to me it's real. Next up, I read Rules for Vanishing. This book, oh my gosh. It's so rare that I read a horror book, but it was Friday the 13th in October. I just felt like you had to at that point, right? So I ended up reading Rules for Vanishing. I read it in one sitting. It took me like 7 hours. It was so good. It was so spooky. I feel like with horror books, you definitely want to feel creeped out. You want to feel like you want the goosebumps. You want to jump every single time something shakes in your house. Like, that's the feelings that you crave. And this book definitely gave it to me. But also, I feel like if you're somebody who wants to get into horror, this is a great stepping stone. If you're very much into horror reads and that's like all you read, I don't recommend this book because it definitely was like a baby level of horror. It was all I could take, and it's probably all that some other people can handle, and that's okay with me because this book was creepy enough and I definitely got what I wanted out of it. I don't even want to explain to you this book. If you want to watch me read it, you guys should go watch my Friday the 13th reading vlog because I capture my entire reading experience on here. But I will say this book had so many different elements. We had evidence from that night, we had interview transcripts, we had the actual events that happened that night. It was magical, it was mystical, it was eerie, it was just everything that you want in an October creepy kind of read. So, I gave this book 4.5 stars because the ending was like a little confusing for me, but it was still one of the best books I read this year simply because of the way it made me feel. I had such a emotional and physical response to this book that it was just top tier. Next up, I read The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Who's Jamie Lynn Barnes? Oh well. Jennifer Lynn Barnes wrote this book and it was really, really good. I started listening to this book as an audiobook and then I got home from school and I wanted to keep reading it. So I physically read like the last 100 pages. I stayed up till 3 in the morning to finish this book. It was so, so good. If you're a big fan of Criminal Minds, I heavily recommend it because of how Penelope Garcia's backstory of how the FBI literally saved her life and took her out of a troubled life. That's kind of what these teens in the Naturals program go through. So the concept of this book is really, really interesting and the plot is so, so fast. And the characters, oh my gosh, you learn to fall in love with every single character, even their flaws. You're like, yes, queen, I love that you have that flaw. It is just so good, so fun. It's like, I can't even describe it, but it's like you're watching Criminal Minds meets like Friends. Because of the community that these teenagers build together is something so beautiful and pure. And I think when everybody says, I want to be part of a friend group, this is the friend group that you want to be a part of. Last but not least, I have Iron Flame. No, I did not put Fourth Wing on here. I wasn't as big a fan as Fourth Wing as I was Iron Flame because, oh my gosh, so much happened in this book, literally. I can't even talk to you guys much about it because of all the stuff that went on. And how many spoilers I would give away. I vlogged me reading Fourth Wing and I vlogged me reading Iron Flame. So if you want to go and watch these vlogs, I heavily recommend it because it is just such a wild ride that I'm taking on and that you will be taken on with me whenever we read these books. So go definitely read it, but I am so in love with this book. I'm in love with these characters. I'm a little bitty teeny tiny, very much depressed that we have to wait an entire year before we get the third book. It's fine, Rebecca, whatever. Go watch the vlogs. Find out more. Find out more. Well guys, that is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching and just listening to me rave about my top 10 reads of 2023. I read so many good books this year and I'm so thankful that I was able to sit down and read them and just enjoy them. I hope that you guys also had top 10 reads of this year. So comment down below your top 3, your top 5, your top 10. Let me know if we have any in common because I could literally take somebody to coffee and talk to them all day about any one of these books. Seriously, so good. So yes, please like this video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe. I post every Thursday, and I'll see you guys next weekend. And I'll see you guys next Thursday. Bye!